What if I told you that during the chaos of World War II, an entire company of 200 elite soldiers vanished without a trace? Not killed in action. Not taken prisoner. Simply gone. Their mission files? Classified for decades. Their families? Told conflicting stories by military officials. Their names? Almost erased from history. Today we uncover one of the most disturbing and unexplained incidents of World War II. A mission so secret that multiple governments worked together to bury all evidence of its existence. Before we dive into this chilling story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and comment below which country you're watching from. Your support helps us continue bringing these hidden historical mysteries to light. The date was November 12, 1943. As the Allied forces pushed against Axis powers across multiple fronts, a specialized unit was assembled for a mission of utmost secrecy. The unit consisted of American, British, and Canadian soldiers, all specially selected for their unique skills. Some were language experts, others were demolition specialists, and a few were said to have backgrounds in scientific research. Military records that were declassified in 2008 reveal that this unit was designated Task Force Sentinel. What made this force unusual was that it operated outside the traditional chain of command. Instead, it reported directly to a special division that had connections to both military intelligence and scientific research departments. The soldiers received their orders in a remote facility in southern England. Witnesses who worked at the facility later reported that unusual equipment was brought in during the weeks leading up to the mission. Large metal containers with no markings. Strange devices that resembled radio equipment but functioned differently. And perhaps most curious of all, protective gear that didn't match any standard military issue of the time. What exactly was Task Force Sentinel supposed to do? This is where the official record becomes deliberately vague. According to the limited documents that survived intentional purging, the mission had something to do with investigating a strategically significant anomaly behind enemy lines in a remote section of the Ardennes forest. Some historians believe the mission was related to intelligence about Nazi scientific experiments. Others suggest it might have been connected to the search for looted artifacts or gold. But these theories don't explain the unusual composition of the task force or the specialized equipment they carried. One document, discovered in the personal effects of a high-ranking British intelligence officer after his death in 1987, contained a cryptic briefing note: Sentinel must secure and contain the anomaly. Under no circumstances should direct contact be attempted without full protective measures. Time distortion effects have been observed within 500 meters of the target location. This reference to time distortion has led to considerable speculation. Was this merely code language for something else? Or were Allied forces investigating something truly beyond conventional understanding? On the night of November 15, 1943, Task Force Sentinel was airlifted to a drop zone approximately 20 kilometers from their target. The weather conditions were poor, heavy rain and low visibility, but the mission proceeded anyway, suggesting an unusual urgency. According to the flight crews who transported them, the soldiers seemed tense but determined. One pilot later wrote in his personal journal, "Never seen troops carrying that kind of gear before. Not weapons, something else." And the officers were carrying sealed orders in metal containers. Whatever they were going after, it wasn't Germans. Radio operators established a forward communication post to maintain contact with the task force. For the first 24 hours, regular check-ins were received. The unit reported moving through enemy territory without detection and establishing a perimeter around their target area by the evening of November 16. The last routine communication came at 2300 hours that night. The message was simple: target located. Preparing to secure anomaly at first light. Weather conditions deteriorating. Strange electrical activity in the area affecting some equipment. What happened next remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of the war. At approximately 0300 hours on November 17, the communication team received a garbled emergency transmission. Fragments of the message have been preserved. Intense light from below ground. Men can see them but they can't. Time is wrong here. Watches all showing different. Do not send rescue. Containment is. God help us there. Then silence. All attempts to re-establish communication failed. When the task force failed to make their scheduled check-in at 0600 hours, a reconnaissance aircraft was dispatched to fly over the area. The pilot reported seeing no signs of combat, no evidence of German forces in the vicinity, and most disturbingly, no sign of 200 Allied soldiers who should have been there. Within 48 hours, a search and rescue operation was launched. Elite commandos were sent to the last known coordinates of Task Force Sentinel. What they found, or rather what they didn't find, defies explanation. There were no bodies, no equipment, no signs of a firefight, no indication that 200 men had ever been there at all. The only evidence that something unusual had occurred was a perfect circle of affected vegetation approximately 400 meters in diameter. Within this circle, all plant life appeared to have aged several seasons in a matter of days. Trees that had been in full leaf were bare, as if winter had come instantly to just that location. The search team reported compasses malfunctioning within the circle and watches running at inconsistent speeds. Several men experienced what they described as disorientation and lost time, feeling that minutes had passed when their comrades insisted they had been unresponsive for over an hour. After 3 days, the search was suddenly called off by direct order from Allied High Command. The entire incident was classified at the highest level, and participants were sworn to secrecy under threat of court-martial. In the weeks that followed, families of the missing men received different explanations. Some were told their loved ones had died in a plane crash over the English Channel. Others were informed that the soldiers had been killed in combat during a classified operation. A few received notice that their family members were missing in action with no further details. More telling was what happened to the military records. Personnel files of Task Force Sentinel members were altered or sealed. The unit itself was struck from official rosters as if it had never existed. Even the pilot logs of the aircraft that transported the men were modified to show routine training flights instead. Why such an elaborate cover-up? If the men had simply been killed in a failed mission, standard protocols for casualties would have been followed. The extraordinary measures taken to conceal not just the outcome but the very existence of the mission suggest something far more disturbing was at stake. Despite official efforts to bury the incident, fragments of the story survived through individuals who were either directly involved or adjacent to the events. James Harrington, a radio operator at the Forward Communication Post, suffered a mental breakdown shortly after the incident. Before being institutionalized in 1944, he told his wife that he had heard voices that shouldn't exist coming through his headset during the final transmission. Voices speaking English, he claimed, but in accents and using phrases that made no sense. Dr. Eleanor Reed, a physicist who was reportedly part of the scientific team that prepared equipment for Task Force Sentinel, resigned from government service immediately after the incident. In 1967, shortly before her death, she wrote a letter to a colleague mentioning her regret about the Ardennes situation, and claiming that what they found there should have remained buried. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Perhaps most chilling was the testimony of Walter Brennan, a German farmer who lived near the area where Task Force Sentinel disappeared. Interviewed by Allied intelligence officers after the region was captured in 1944, Brennan claimed that on the night of November 16 to 17, 1943, he saw a column of light reaching into the sky from the forest. He described hearing the sound of thousands of voices all speaking at once, followed by absolute silence. When asked if he reported this to German authorities, Brennan said local SS officers had already cordoned off the area weeks before and forbidden locals from entering the forest under penalty of death. Over the decades, various theories have emerged to explain the disappearance of Task Force Sentinel. 1. Conventional explanation. Some military historians maintain that the unit likely encountered an elite German force and was wiped out, with the bodies being removed and evidence eliminated to prevent Allied forces from learning about new German tactics or weapons. 2. Chemical weapons theory. Others suggest the task force may have stumbled upon a Nazi chemical weapons test site and were exposed to an experimental agent that left no traces of their bodies. The subsequent cover-up would have been to prevent panic about such weapons. 3. The defection theory. A more controversial view holds that the unit may have been compromised and defected to the enemy. The elaborate cover-up would have been to hide this embarrassing possibility. 4. The experiment gone wrong. Some researchers believe Task Force Sentinel itself was part of an Allied experimental weapons test that went catastrophically wrong, explaining both the unusual composition of the unit and the aggressive classification of all related information. 5. The temporal displacement theory, perhaps most outlandish but intriguingly aligned with the fragmented evidence, is the suggestion that the unit encountered something that affected the very fabric of time. The references to time distortion, watches malfunctioning, and the accelerated aging of vegetation within the circle all hint at something beyond conventional understanding. In 1956, a joint American-British intelligence team quietly returned to the site. Their classified report, partially declassified in 2019, noted only that the area shows no current signs of the anomalous properties previously documented, and recommended continued monitoring but no intervention. In 1962, during the height of the Cold War, Soviet military archives show that they too developed an interest in the region, sending their own scientific team to the area. What they found was never disclosed, but satellite imagery from the period shows a hastily established research outpost that operated for approximately 3 months before being suddenly abandoned. Most telling of all was the NATO classification directive issued in 1976, which redesignated all files related to Task Force Sentinel under a new security protocol. Unlike standard military classifications based on national security concerns, this directive specifically cited potential public panic and philosophical implications beyond national security as reasons for continued secrecy. Beginning in the 1970s, unusual reports began emerging from the Ardennes region. Hikers and local residents described encountering what appeared to be disoriented soldiers in outdated uniforms, who would ask strange questions about the war before disappearing into the forest. Local authorities dismissed these as pranks or encounters with war reenactment enthusiasts. More difficult to dismiss were the synchronized sightings that reportedly occurred on November 17, 1983, exactly 40 years after the disappearance. On that night, at least 12 separate witnesses across a 20-kilometer radius reported seeing figures in World War II military gear walking in formation through forests, fields, and in one case, directly through a newly built housing development, apparently oblivious to the modern structures around them. Forest rangers who investigated the area the following day found boot prints that abruptly started and stopped in impossible patterns, as if the men making them had appeared and disappeared mid-stride. In 2008, a cache of documents relating to Task Force Sentinel was scheduled for routine declassification. At the last moment, the process was halted by a joint request from the U.S. Department of Defense and the British Ministry of Defense, extending the classification for another 75 years without explanation. This unusual intervention caught the attention of Maxwell Jensen, an investigative journalist specializing in government secrecy. Jensen filed Freedom of Information Act requests in both countries and after a 3-year legal battle, received heavily redacted files that nonetheless contained valuable new information. Among the revelations was confirmation that Task Force Sentinel had indeed been investigating what was termed an atmospheric anomaly, with possible implications for advanced physics. Documents also revealed that 3 separate search operations, not just one, had been mounted following the disappearance, with the latter 2 being conducted in absolute secrecy. Most significantly, Jensen discovered references to recovered personal effects that materialized at the site years after the incident. These included identification tags, personal letters, and equipment parts that military officials confirmed belonged to members of the missing task force. According to the documents, some of these items showed anomalous aging patterns inconsistent with normal temporal progression. In 2017, an elderly woman in Brussels came forward with a watch she claimed had belonged to her uncle, a Belgian resistance fighter who had served as a guide for Task Force Sentinel. The watch had been missing along with her uncle since 1943, but mysteriously appeared on her doorstep in 1993. Laboratory analysis confirmed the watch was authentic to the period, but revealed something inexplicable. Radiocarbon dating suggested the metal had somehow aged over 200 years despite being manufactured in the 1940s. If we set aside the most fantastical theories and focus only on verified facts, we are still left with an undeniable mystery. Approximately 200 Allied soldiers vanished during a classified mission in 1943. The incident was deemed sensitive enough to warrant an extraordinary level of secrecy that has persisted for decades. Multiple governments have maintained this veil of secrecy through changing administrations and shifting geopolitical landscapes. Whatever Task Force Sentinel encountered in the Ardennes forest was significant enough to merit this enduring silence. Was it a weapons technology so advanced it remains classified nearly a century later? Was it evidence of something that would fundamentally change our understanding of reality? Or was it simply a military disaster so embarrassing that governments would rather let these men remain forgotten than acknowledge what happened to them? Perhaps most disturbing is the possibility that the members of Task Force Sentinel may not be dead in the conventional sense. The periodic appearance of their personal effects, the sightings of soldiers in outdated uniforms, and the strange temporal phenomena reported at the site all hint at a fate potentially worse than death: existence in some kind of temporal limbo, disconnected from the normal flow of time. The case of Task Force Sentinel's disappearance remains one of the most profound unsolved mysteries of World War II. While conventional historians dismiss it as nothing more than a failed secret mission subsequently obscured by bureaucratic classification, the evidence points to something far more unusual. Somewhere in the mists of history, 200 brave men ventured into the unknown and never returned, at least not in any way we can comprehend. Their story represents not just a military mystery, but a potential window into aspects of reality that mainstream science has yet to acknowledge. As governments continue to guard the secrets of what happened that November night in 1943, we can only honor these forgotten soldiers by keeping their story alive and demanding the truth about their fate. If you found this video interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more hidden historical mysteries. Don't forget to comment below which country you're watching from. We're always fascinated to see how far these forgotten stories reach. And if you or anyone you know has information about Task Force Sentinel or similar incidents, share your story in the comments. Sometimes the missing pieces of history come from the most unexpected sources. Until next time, remember, not all who are lost want to be found.